Hello everyone, Jim here with Sunrise Farm. Welcome back. This is our January planting seed starting update for what's going to come in the latter part of the month on through February leading up to the first part of March. I live in the lower half of South Carolina, so I'm in zone 8B. A lot of this will work for you if you're in zones 7, 8, and 9, but if you're up in further north, you might have to do some adjustments time-wise in what you're going to plant and when you're going to plant it, all based on your last frost date. As I discussed in our previous December update, which you can see right here, we I mentioned about the new zoning map. And no, it's not super critical to know what zone you're in, but I also mentioned in that same video that if you look at the Farmer's Almanac, almanac.com, you can type in there's a way to go through and look for your last frost date, and you can type in your zip code and it'll give you your last frost date for where you live. And that is the most critical thing to know. That is not an absolute, so please don't take it as one. That is your average last frost date. That means that yes, a week or two after that, it is possible for a lot of people to get a frost, especially depending on some kind of uh, El Nino type of winter, El Nino, I guess. Anyways, point being is it gives you your average date to kind of judge by. Most of you probably already know that, but so what I'm going to do is I already talked about what I was planting seed started in this month. I'll just quickly breeze over what I'm going to do the rest of this month, and then we'll talk about February and what leading up to March 1st. March 1st down here in the south is a astronomically busy time for seed starting. So we're going to talk about that a brief minute too and just kind of give an overview. As I also stated in my previous video, I'm going to try to do this type of update video once a month. Generally, kind of between the first, second week of the month is what I hope to give you a look ahead for a month or two, so you know what seeds you might need to buy, to go ahead and check the seeds you might have, make sure of dates on them, because the older the seed gets, the less viable it is. Doesn't mean it isn't any good. It just means less viable, meaning you might not have as great a germination rate as others. But it also might tell you that you need to go get some seed starting mix, or if you make your own, to get the ingredients, or get some pots if you're going to pot up, or seed starting trays, whatever you need to do just to try to help prepare before that time gets upon you. Try to prepare ahead of time. Excuse me. Easy for me to say. Anyway, let's take a look at it. So the 15th of the month for me, so January 15th. By the way, today is Saturday, January 13th, 2024. So for what's going to be started is I'm going to restart on up to the 1st of February. Actually, I'm going to do most of these the 1st of February, but there's some caveats to it. But you can do another spring round of greens. So broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, collards, and Brussels sprouts. Now, I could start those actually. I could have already started them in actuality. As most of y'all may know, especially if you live in the United States, the next week on up to 2 weeks, we're going to have kind of two waves of Arctic blast. And what that really means is that whatever your normal low temperatures are, unfortunately, they're going to go lower in most cases. I am not going to be, where I happen to live in South Carolina, is not predicted to be, forecasted to be too far off from my norm. It is going to be a little bit lower. But there are some places going to see 20-degree drops below what their normal is, and that's going to vastly affect not only just life in general, but it's going to affect, obviously, your growing seasons and how things seed start and propagate, especially if you don't have something like a hot house, some type of hoop house or whatever that you can keep warm, garage maybe, or what have you. But I wanted to first and foremost say that anybody, which is going to be pretty much the majority of the country, but anybody that's going to be in the path of that storm, please be safe. I sincerely pray for you that a hedge of protection is around you and your family. Yes, we don't want our gardens and our vegetable plots, food that we grow for our home, or perhaps you do it for a market like I'm doing. No, we don't want damage to occur to those things, but we can recover from those things. I pray against a hedge of protection against injury and people being without heat and without power. So I'm just praying for you. Anyways, back to the talking about the greens. So it could have already been started for me in a seed starting tray. And again, that is vast majority most of what I do is start everything in seed starting trays. There's obvious exceptions, carrots, potatoes, but we'll talk about some of those things. So everything I'm mentioning here is on the premise that you're going to use a seed starting tray to do it, and then you're going to transplant it, either up pot it in bigger pots, like I'm doing to a lot of my tomatoes and peppers, or you're going to transplant it into the ground, depending on what it is, right before or right after your last frost date. The greens can go in the ground earlier because as long as they're established, they can take a frost. One thing I wanted to mention about cauliflower, in case you didn't know this, there is in the self-blanching varieties, at least that I'm aware of, there is both a fall style and a spring style. So it wouldn't be necessarily wise to plant the fall style coming up now in spring because there are different tolerances of heat and cool. And most will tell you that on their package if you're looking for it. It's kind of like buying onion seed. Depending on where you live, you have short day, long day, and intermediate day onions. So you have to kind of know where you live. But it's generally on the package information when you get it. What I'm going to be starting this month on the 15th is I'm going to be starting my eggplants. So I have decided to go ahead and start those now. And I actually may hold off. I say 15th because I basically time my seed starting kind of the first 15th and first again, if you will, or last day of the month. Not for any particular reason, and that's just kind of my own personal schedule. There's plenty of leeway in these things. You can have a couple of weeks either way, especially on these greens. Some of the greens, if you wait too long, like broccoli and Brussels sprouts, you're probably not going to get a good spring harvest out of them. But things like collards and cabbage, they'll grow on into the warmer, not warm like hot, but they'll grow on into the warmer spring season. So some of the herbs I'm going to plant are seed start or oregano and parsley. And then there comes one that peas. Peas actually could have also been started. You could have planted peas in the ground. They would just germinate slow and grow slow, but they're a cool weather crop anyway. But peas can be kind of fickle and tricky. They're simple in the sense that once they're going, but they can be kind of fickle and tricky to get going sometimes. But did you know that you could actually start peas in a seed starting tray? Yeah, exactly. Now, as many peas as I would be planting, that's not really feasible for me because I'll probably be dropping a few hundred in the ground because those seeds are planted so close. But I don't want to not give you proper information. If you're just going to plant a handful or a small raised bed or what have you, you can absolutely start peas in a seed starting tray. And then in about 3, maybe 4 weeks time, depending on how slow or quick they're growing, they're ready to transplant. And you can definitely go ahead and transplant them now. So if that's you and you thought about doing some peas, go ahead. There's also some bush variety peas that don't even require trellising if you need to look into that for your raised beds to make it simpler. All right, so that pretty much is the summation of what I'm going to do the rest of this month. Now let's talk about February 1st. February 1st, I'm going to be starting arugula, chives, and sage. kale, lettuce, and I never knew if I was pronouncing this word right, but tomatillos. Tomatillos, if you're not that familiar with them, they are a tomato style, best way I can maybe describe it, tomato style uh, vegetable that is mainly used in salsas like salsa verde. But I'm just gonna plant a handful of those just to see. In actuality, I've never planted those before. I'm gonna plant them this year, and I'm gonna test the market with them just to see both how I like them personally, and or how they might do in my market. So that's what's going to be planted on the February 1st. So now moving on to February, the middle of February, February 15th. For me here in the South, from February 14th, kind of using Valentine's Day as the mark, on to the end of the month. So about a 2-week window. Because, things vary, right? Rain, water on the ground, general weather, timing, maybe you're, sick, under the weather, on vacation, whatever. But there's about a 2-week window there that you have, for me, to get potatoes in the ground. This year, I'm going to be planting Yukon Gold, probably some form of red potato, and then perhaps some Kennebecks. I haven't fully determined yet. I'm still trying to work out my plot layout to know how much ground I want to go with, or how much ground plot space I want to give them. But so obviously I'm not starting potatoes in a seed starting tray, like I said. That's not something you can do there. But what I am going to be starting in a seed tray in the middle of February is basil, pak choy, spinach, and Swiss chard. Now, this is not everything one could start in these particular timings. This is just what I'm going to be planting and when I can start it. Now, the other thing I'm going to be starting in mid-February is beets. But did you know, because I see so much mixed information out there, but did you know that you can start beets in a seed starting tray? This is the way I generally prefer to start them. And the reason I prefer to start them that way is beets, as you may or may not know, unless you get a specific variety from a seed store, an online seed store that would be a single monogerm, beets are a multi-germ seed. You could get a 2, 3, maybe even 4 beets out of one seed pod. And I want to be able to, when those happen, I want to be able to thin them out. And typically I won't, it depends on the situation, but I won't even necessarily thin them out and throw the thinnings away. If you take your time a minute, you can actually repropagate another tray when you separate them. So you can actually separate them. Let's just say a seed germinates 4 little seedlings. Conceivably, you could get 4 beet plants out of it. Now, what's the purpose in doing this? Well, there's a couple of purposes for me. One of which is, like I said, I like to go ahead and thin them out instead of growing them in clusters, because that's what will happen if you plant the seeds in the ground. They'll grow in clusters, and they generally won't all grow the same size. And sometimes it can even be somewhat of a problem, and you lose part of it anyway. But for me, I want to be able to grow them kind of in a uniform row, and relatively speaking, as much as anything will grow this way, to a uniform size. So again, you don't have to do it. You can simply, germinate them. You can simply plant them straight into the ground, which most people do. But I just wanted you to know that you can also start them in seed starting trays. So one of my 162 cell trays that I showed in my last video, that is generally what I will start my beets in. And I generally will go ahead and start an entire tray of them, because I plant a pretty long row and you can plant those pretty close together. So that is pretty much what I'm going to be doing in February. So if you haven't gotten those seeds and you're interested in planting some of those, I'd go ahead and make arrangements for that. And something that I did the other day was I took every seed. I sat down at my dining room table, and I took probably a couple hours in all sincerity, but I took out every single seed pack I had. And I wanted to know a few things. I wanted to know how much of a seed I had. So I would open up the packs and see how many seeds were in it. depending on what it was. But I needed to know how many seeds I had for a particular thing to obviously know if I needed more. I needed to know if it was a variety that I liked or disliked from before, to whether I wanted to plant it, discard it, what I wanted to do with it. Some of the things I'm planting are trials. I would encourage you, if you have the space and the time, to always do a couple of trials every single season. And if you only have one season, it's all right. Do a couple of trials. Maybe you do a different tomato. Um, Maybe do some kind of other pepper, or a different variety of carrot. Who knows? There are so many varieties out there, and some of them you may find grow better for you. Some of them you may find you like to taste better than others. I would just always encourage you to be trialing things. I kind of enjoy trialing things just to see what's going to happen. Hey, and be honest, sometimes it's a 100% failure. But hey, you don't know if you don't try either, right? So, in getting all of that said, I also want to make sure I don't forget to mention that on that almanac.com, and this is it right here, you can, when you're looking at that last frost date, you can also find your planting calendar for your area. And it comes in two calendars, the spring calendar and the fall calendar. Now, I know I said this in my last video, but it's worth repeating. This gives you a very good head start on knowing like the varieties to plant and when to plant them. It even includes seed starting dates in trays and transplanting dates. But please know, it's a generalized list. It's not an absolute. They don't have every single vegetable you could think of on there. In fact, they don't have many on there that I grow. They tell you, like, they won't tell you that you can transplant beets. They tell you can only seed start them in the ground, plant them in the ground. But it is a very good starting point if you need a starting point. So now let me just take a few minutes to go over what you're going to need for March. Most things get planted, seed started on March 1st. Because for me, most of my stuff's going to go out the first, second week in April into the ground. And so we propagate them in seed starting trays, 4 to 6 weeks ahead of time. So most of this stuff will get started the first day of March. Things like cantaloupe, carrots you could actually plant in mid-February as well. They may just germinate or grow slower, but it's fine. So cantaloupe, carrots, corn. Now corn's another one of those, if you didn't know it, you can actually do it in seed starting trays. You can propagate those in seed starting trays, and it works extremely well if you're fighting some weather conditions, or you might be fighting some time issues. Especially works well if you only plan on planting, a handful of corn plants in some raised beds, or maybe you got a real small plot and you're just doing like a 10 by 10 area and you need maybe 100 plants. Whatever the case is, you can definitely seed start corn the same way you can everything else. It does work, I promise you. I did a couple hundred that way last year and it works just fine. So the other seeds that you want to make sure you have for the first is cucumbers. I'm planting one more spice, dill. Okra. Okra is a big staple in the South, so if you're not from around here, you may not be that familiar with okra, especially if you're up north. I'm originally from up north, and I wouldn't have known what an okra plant was to save my soul. But I married a southern girl, so that's how that goes. Parsnips, radishes, pumpkins, turnips, watermelons, butternut squash, squash itself, the yellow squash, and zucchini. And one more that you might not think too much about, but for the 1st of March, is flowers. So if you're going to plant things like zinnias or cosmo or sunflowers or some others, marigolds, you can also get those going around that same time and do it the exact same way in most cases about doing it in a seed starting tray. It works, like I said, it works the same way. Now, what are some of the reasons why you might want flowers? If you hadn't thought about growing flowers before, there's a multitude of reasons. The first and foremost reason is for attracting beneficial insects. attracting bees and butterflies and things to help pollinate some of your crops. Of course, they add an aesthetically pleasing effect to your garden, giving you a bunch of beautiful different colors and just kind of make you feel good, make you feel happy. But there's also another additional aspect that I'm going to try this year. I haven't done this yet, so I'm going to try it this year. But if you happen to do any type of farmer's market, you can attempt to sell some cut flower arrangements. Just cut flowers stem by stem, or maybe do little vase arrangements. Um, yeah, who knows? Just give it a whirl and just see how that goes for you. I tend to like to throw some flowers in my garden. Initially, it was just all for beneficial insects. But this year I thought I'd give it a branch out and give it a try to do some cut flowers and just see how I like it. Or see how people respond to it at any rate. All right, well, I think that's about all I got for this video. I hope this was very beneficial and very helpful. I would love to know in the comments if I overlooked anything, if you have some other things to add, because clearly there's just way too much in the fruits and vegetable world to grow and to know, to be an expert at everything. And I enjoy sharing my journey with you, and I hope you enjoy it too. So if there's anything that you want to put in the comments or questions, if I can answer them, I certainly will. Again, I don't know everything, so perhaps if you look at the comments, other people can answer it. And please let me know also in the comments. Me doing this once a month to try to help prep for the months ahead, is that beneficial to you? Is that something that you'd like to know more of about something or various things? I just want to know how I can help you best. That's you taking this journey with my family and I about, coming to grow things. I hope we can all grow things together. I truly do. So thank you once again for stopping by and watching this video. I appreciate your time very much. Take care and God bless you. Have an amazing day in the Lord.